Here's a sight you won't often see. A team of men trying to capsize a tractor. Wonderful, isn't it? When you want the thing to go over... Ah, there. No, not that time. We missed the scaffolding on top. This is just an ordinary farm tractor of a kind used in thousands every day on the farms of Britain. The girdering is there to prevent damage if it overturns. And the men are from the National Institute of Agricultural Engineering, which is closely concerned with tractor safety, amongst other things. There she goes. No, she doesn't. She's playing for safety today. Tests, like the one you've just seen, prove that the modern tractor, properly handled and serviced, is a safe, stable machine. If you know what you're doing, driving a tractor is as safe as sitting on a chair. If you know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing. Some say it takes a fool to overturn a tractor. Well, that's not quite true. But a tractor won't go over unless you're doing something wrong. Something you shouldn't ask it to do. Take what I said about sitting on a chair. You don't expect a chair to stand upright if there's air under one of the legs. It stands to reason. Drive a tractor too near a ditch, and it's likely you'll end up in it. And that's not too funny if you're face down with 2 tons of tractor on top of you. You'd be a fool to let that happen, wouldn't you? But in one recent year in Great Britain, 21 men, who were by no means fools, lost their lives or were badly injured in just that way. It's just plain common sense. A tractor rests on its 4 wheels, just like a chair on its 4 legs. Make sure all 4 of your wheels stay on solid ground. But solid ground isn't always as firm as it looks. Here's our demonstration tractor again, taking some sidling ground. Right now, the tractor is perfectly safe and stable. Let's stop the picture, and we'll see just why. See the angle she's taking? The whole weight of the tractor bears vertically down from the center of gravity like this. As long as that weight bears down between the wheels, nothing is going to happen. Now watch it as we tilt the ground a bit further. See how the weight starts to bear over to one side? When that arrow reaches the outside wheel, the tractor is ready to capsize. Only a fool is going to drive a tractor across ground as steep as that. But can you always tell how steep the ground is? You've seen a rabbit hole before. And molehills too. Now watch this. Just for a split second, the slope of the ground has increased beyond the safety level, and over she goes. It looked safe enough, but it wasn't. What's the answer? It's obvious. When you've got to work over sidling ground, make sure you know your ground. Don't just bash on regardless. Look out for holes and bumps. And wherever the nature of the work allows, use a wider track. With your track widened, the weight is going to bear down inside the wheels at any angle you're likely to encounter. You will be very much less likely to overturn. If the ground's wet as well as sloping, there's another hidden danger to look out for: skidding. And suppose there is something in the way. Take a look at what happens. The four wheels are still on the ground and the weight's bearing down nicely between them. But this time the tractor isn't just moving forward, it's moving sideways too. So there's another force to think about: momentum. 2 tons of tractor skidding sideways builds up a lot of momentum. Put something in its way and you can stop the skid all right, but the rest of the tractor wants to keep on moving. And you don't come to rest, you come to grief. In 1 year, 13 men were killed and 14 more injured by accidents on sidling ground. There is only one sure way of avoiding them. Wherever you can, widen your track. This will give you a good safety margin in hand against hidden dangers like holes or hummocks or sticky ground. And if you have to use a standard track, then take it very slowly and carefully. A tractor is essentially an engine on wheels. Stop the back wheels turning, like this, and the engine will wind the rest of the tractor round the back axle, like this. In the ordinary way, that just isn't going to happen, because in the lower gear, the rear wheels will keep on turning, whether they're slipping or moving forward. And as long as the back wheels turn, they take up the power that might be used to lift the front of the tractor off the ground. Let's take a look at this. Here's the weight of the tractor bearing downwards from the center of gravity. The 2 axles, back and front, take the entire load. The engine tries to lift the front of the tractor off the ground, but there's too much weight on it, holding it down. So it drives the tractor forward instead. But now what happens when it comes to a sudden rise in the ground? Say a steep bank. Now it's a different story. See how the weight distribution has changed. Much more on the back and much less on the front. And so much the easier for the engine to overcome. Now, as so often happens, the driving wheels start to dig in. Just a touch more power to get up the bank and more work for the undertaker. 7 victims killed or injured in 1 year by this accident alone. And the worst of it is, it all happens too fast. Once it's started, there's no getting out of it. No time to stamp on the clutch. You've had it. There's only one answer when you get in a position like this. Be careful. If you have to climb a steep slope where there's some danger of your back wheels digging in, go at it backwards. The reason's simple. Going backwards, the whole situation's reversed. Everything that was against you before is now acting in your favor. It's slower, but you'll stay alive. If you pull at something, you've always got to remember that it's pulling back at you, just as hard. You'll soon find that out if one of you stops pulling. In this case, it was the wall. A simple principle, but never to be forgotten, especially if you're working with a tractor. This cultivator is pulling the tractor back with exactly the force that the tractor is using to pull the cultivator. Let's stop the picture again and you'll see what I mean. Here's the weight on the front axle, and here's the pull created by the engine trying to overcome it. And now there's a third force, the backwards pull of the cultivator working on the drawbar. This force is holding the tractor stable. These two are trying to pull it over, All three are working on the fulcrum where the back wheel touches the ground. There's a point to remember here. The fulcrum isn't directly under the back axle, as you might expect, but a little forward because of the give of the tires and because the back wheels always dig in a bit. That means the weight on the front exerts less force because it's nearer the fulcrum. Now suppose the implement is a bit heavier than usual and the ground is a bit softer, so that the wheels slip and dig in a bit further still, so that the weight on the front is lightened still further. And just to pile on the agony, the tractor starts to move over rising ground, which, as we've seen, takes a bit more weight off the front. Well, there's nothing specially dangerous so far, but now the driver does something completely fatal. He's felt the wheels slipping and decides that what he needs is more weight on them. So he hitches the chain higher. You can see what he's done. By raising the hitching point, he's increased the backwards leverage of the implement. Now we're all set for a disaster. And here it comes. With that combination, there just wasn't enough weight on the front to hold it down against the engine and the pull of the implement. The prime mistake here was hitching the chain too high. And by the way, some drivers imagine that by hitching the chain below the back axle, this completely cuts out the leverage effect due to the resistance of the implement. It doesn't. As long as the hitching point is above ground level, then the implement is bound to exert a backwards leverage. The answer? Make sure the implement you're using is not too heavy for your tractor or the conditions you're working under, and hitch it as low as possible. Here's another quick way of killing yourself. The tractor is pulling a two-wheeled trailer heavily loaded and attached to the extended drawbar. Now there's another force coming into play. The weight of the trailer acting downwards on the point of attachment. Some drivers fancy this setup because the extra weight on the back wheels gives them more grip. That can be a fatal mistake. With the back wheels acting as fulcrum, this is another force tending to rear up the tractor, and the whole setup is headed for trouble. And that's how 9 men were killed in 1 year. The load was hitched too high. The tractor reared up and crushed them. You can't be too careful about this. With a two-wheeled trailer, hitch it low and near to the back axle. That means it's putting out less backwards leverage. With any implement or trailer, hitch it low and make sure it's not overloaded or too heavy for the conditions of the job. Once a tractor's started to rear, you've only got a fraction of a second to save yourself. It's not in... Next time a fare comes to your parts, take 6 pence on the aeroplane. You might pick up a lesson that can save your life. What's fun in the fairground can be fatal on a tractor. That's centrifugal force. A moving body tries to keep going in a straight line. It objects to being swerved. The heavier it is, the faster it's going, the more it wants to stay on its old course. Here, the tractor is making its turn, but its momentum keeps on going in the same direction. The load, in this case a trailer, presses on the drawbar, trying to push the tractor over. The faster it's going, the harder it pushes. Now we're set up for the most spectacular accident of all, the jackknife. Here you're working downhill with a heavy mounted plow, going perhaps a shade too fast, and with too little headland at the bottom, which means you've got to make a sudden narrow turn. You lift your implement and make your turn in the same moment. What happens? The tractor is turned sideways, but the momentum of the heavy plow, free now from the soil, bears on straight ahead. And the result is... The casualties from this type of accident in 1 year were 27 men killed or injured through tractors being pushed over by their own loads on steep ground. Don't get on the casualty list this year. Working on land like this, take it steady. Keep a broad headland so that you can take your turns as wide as possible. And set your track as wide as you can for the job you're doing. And never be in a hurry. That way, you'll live to plow the next furrow.